Hi, my name is Jennifer, and today we are going to be talking about Japanese communication styles. This is my audience. A quote by James Thurber says, "Precision of communication is important, more important than ever in our era of hair trigger balances, when a false or misunderstood word may create as much disaster as a sudden thoughtless act." This quote helps to explain Japanese communication styles and the consequences of not being aware of some of the crucial differences between their culture and our own. Today, I'll be exploring some of those differences, describing some similarities, and even demonstrating some gestures and facial expressions and what they mean. I'll also be presenting some tips on how you can communicate with someone from the Japanese culture comfortably without the worry of offending them or being misunderstood. Japan is a very densely populated nation. Neighborhoods are crowded and neighbors are very close by. The internal restraint displayed by the Japanese comes from a tendency to conform in order to maintain peace and harmony with close neighbors. The Japanese don't like confrontation and will always try very hard to avoid it. Another result of this is the tendency to consider the good of an entire group instead of simply just themselves. To the Japanese, this shows integrity and character. The Japanese are a highly structured and traditional society. Politeness and personal responsibility are things that are held in the highest regard. Harmony and flow are very important. When meeting with someone of the Japanese culture, context of that meeting is very important. Is it a first meeting, a business meeting? All of these things can make a big difference in how the situation should be approached. One thing that should always be remembered is punctuality. This is a must, and when meeting with a Japanese person, you should always be on time regardless of whether the meeting is social or business. This is something that is very highly regarded in Japanese culture. To be late is to display unwillingness to cooperate and may very well be seen as disrespectful. This is especially important for a business type situation. Upon meeting, a limp handshake is acceptable with little or no eye contact. It is also acceptable to bow slightly with or without a handshake. Bowing is highly regarded, it shows respect, and is greatly appreciated by the Japanese. Things such as a pat on the back are very inappropriate. The Japanese are very reserved when it comes to physical touching, and the Japanese generally keep a great physical distance between themselves and others. When meeting for any type of business purposes, assume that the first meeting will focus on establishing harmony and trust with no actual decision making being accomplished, and always allow 10 minutes of polite conversation before beginning any business meetings. It's appropriate to inquire about their family's health, but avoid asking personal questions. While meeting, it is important to remember that nodding is not signaling agreement, but rather to show that they're listening and understand what you're saying. Because the Japanese will not usually admit to not being able to understand, it is okay to clarify by asking if they understand. But keep in mind that they tend to value silence over talking, and talking too little is better than too much. Always take special note of pauses between words. It's normal for a Japanese person to be vague rather than straightforward. They sometimes will even leave a sentence unfinished, wanting the listener to finish it in their own mind. They will also often answer a question with something that they believe will please the listener, even if it's not true. They may even make up an answer, especially if they feel they're being put into a position of having to admit a mistake. Losing face or being shamed is very serious and can be difficult for the Japanese to tell the difference between their actions being criticized and their personal self being criticized. All criticism is taken very personally. Joking and slang are rarely acceptable or appropriate because they're very easily misunderstood and are likely to be taken literally. Avoid them both unless you know the person very well, even if they are very westernized. Even westernized Japanese tend to be very traditional. During meetings and conversation, try to focus on the person's neck area more than directly in their eyes. Focused eye contact can signify arrogance or disrespect, especially if the other person is older or holds a higher position. Position and title are very important, and in the business world, some Japanese will not agree to meet with someone who they feel has a lower position, and they will instead send someone who they feel is equal in rank to the colleague requesting the meeting. The Japanese are a high context culture. Much importance is placed on nonverbal communication. The Japanese spend a lot of time getting to know one another before engaging any important transactions. Saying no is thought to be offensive, and if you offend someone, you can cause them to lose face. The Japanese are a highly masculine culture where men are valued for their aggressiveness, material success, and strength, and women are valued as well for their modesty, focus on quality of life, and tenderness. It is a high power distance culture, meaning there is a big social gap between those with power and those without. This even includes friendships and relationships. In a high power distance culture, it is considered inappropriate to confront others assertively. There are clear rules for communication that must not be broken. The Japanese subscribe to what is called the peaceful relations principle, meaning they only feel it is necessary to say what preserves peaceful relationships with others. They don't contradict others or point out errors because it is seen as shaming. This principle is less important in private, intimate conversations than it is in public. The Japanese behave differently toward people they have a kinship with. With those people, they have a much more direct style of communicating because societal rituals and the other person's dignity need not be considered. The Japanese use several different communication styles with different groups ranging from direct and assertive to obliging and avoidant. Direct communication is only used with people of very close kinship, most often parents. An obliging style is something that is used when communicating with acquaintances, neighbors, co-workers, teachers, and supervisors. In Japanese communication, there is something called honorifics. This is a crucial piece of Japanese communication, and it's important to understand the system in order to communicate effectively. Honorifics is a system of where you put a word at the end of someone's last name when addressing them or referring to them. Virtually anytime you're communicating with someone in Japanese culture, honorifics will be used. The system symbolizes different levels of respect, so it is important that you make sure that you're using the proper terms. It's also important that you never use honorifics when referring to yourself because it's seen as arrogant. A good way to remember the system is to think in terms of he or she. In instances where you would normally use these pronouns, you would use honorifics instead. Some examples are sama, great respect, or somebody who's very important. San, when used when meaning someone, or it's less formal, doesn't require great respect. Chan is mainly for girls, friendship, or mostly for young children. Baka means idiot, fool, or jerk, and it's an insult, but it can be an endearing term when it's between two close friends. Sensei is used with the first name and not the last name, and it means teacher. And senpai is another word to use when you're speaking to someone in the upper class. It's similar to sama. Examples are from the Karate Kid. You remember he used to say Daniel-san, and that was the informal way of greeting him. I'm going to demonstrate some things that Japanese, the way that they greet each other. Bowing, men do it with their hands at their sides. A little eye contact, maybe a little handshake. Females always have their arms in the front with their hands on their legs and no eye contact and bow like that. The lower and longer the bow, the deeper the respect is shown. Waving your hand back and forth in front of your face signals that you can't help or you don't understand. When you refer to yourself, you point to your nose. You never point at a Japanese person. It's considered rude. Signaling someone to come to you, you do like this with your fingers down. You never beckon this way, and you never beckon an older person. Crossing your arms like this sometimes means in our culture that you're standoffish, not listening. In Japanese culture, it simply means that if their eyes are closed, they're in deep thought. If their eyes are open, they're likely disagreeing with you. When you give a gift, give it with both hands on the gift. Offer it as a small token. They will refuse the gift politely, then you politely insist, then they will take the gift. Try to include gifts for everyone in the meeting, even the main person's family members and children. The Japanese believe that in order for there to be harmony, the people who are communicating should be so in tune with each other that a lot of words aren't necessary. They feel that a concise statement of 10% of the message is enough for the person to figure out the other 90%. There's a big communication barrier because Americans often don't understand what the Japanese are trying to say, and at the same time, the Japanese are unaware that their message isn't being clear. Japanese communication is very detailed with a lot of rules and nuances that are important to remember. Today, I covered the importance of nonverbal communication, body language, honorifics, and some of the origins of their communication styles. I hope the info you received today will help you if you're ever in a position to communicate with someone in the Japanese culture. Sayonara.
Sayonara.
Later.